Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast.
This is Teachers Talk Radio and you are listening live.
Well, good morning and welcome to another Friday morning break with me, Dr. Poppy Gibson. And I'm going to be totally transparent that today we have got a guest who knows something about something in education that I really do not know much about at all. So I'm super excited to welcome along today Lucy Wheeler, who'll be joining us in a second. Just before we have Lucy talk about herself and everything, our theme for today is home education. We're going to be asking Lucy all things about home education and alternative provision. So if you do join us today and you want to type any questions while we're live between 11 and 12, just pop them into the chat and I will ask Lucy for you. If you're listening back at a podcast, unfortunately, there is no chat available, but I'm sure that at the end of today's session, we might ask Lucy if she's happy to share how people can get in touch if they want to know more. So without further ado, good morning, Lucy.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, good start.
It's the biggest stress, isn't it, coming on the radio?
I know. I was pressing all of the buttons and it was taking ages to load and I thought, oh my goodness, is it even going to work? So we're over the first hurdle.
We're over the only hurdle. And now the only hurdle we're here to talk about is that of our education system.
Yes. Oh, how long have we got?
Sadly, only an hour, but I'm sure this is a conversation we'll continue to have. But I'm just so excited just to say thank you. I know so many people have been really excited on Twitter about you coming on the show today. So maybe before we dive in, I will be honest, Lucy, I've written a very long list of questions for you because I'm surprised how little I know about home education. So before we start with that, can you maybe please tell us a bit about yourself, why you're so interested in this topic, a bit about kind of where you're at in your career and where you've been? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I'll start by saying I'm a home educating parent myself, so I've got very much a personal interest in this as well as a professional interest in it. I've got a teenage daughter who I'll explain as we go along, but she is home educated part-time and she actually attends 14-16 provision part-time, but we can talk about that a bit more later.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I've worked in education for about 12-13 years in various different types of settings. So preschools, primary schools, special educational needs schools and things like that, kind of in the classroom. So I've got kind of hands-on classroom experience for a number of years while my daughter was growing up and actually attending mainstream school herself. Mm-hmm. And then back in 2020, good old pandemic times, I was furloughed. And I then started to do some temporary research work with Anglia Ruskin University. And I absolutely love research. It's always been a passion of mine throughout my career anyway. And I did my my degree and my master's at Anglia Ruskin as well.
Oh, wow, amazing. Congrats. Great place to study.
Yes, it is, and to work. I work there now as well. But yeah, I did my degree and my masters are both in child development and early years education. So I've always had a kind of interest around that particular thing and how children develop and what they kind of need in terms of support for their education to develop as well. So I started doing some temporary research projects with Anglia Ruskin in 2020, and then I came on board as a full-time member of staff last year, working as a research assistant there. And I've also just started my PhD with them as well.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I like to
Very exciting.
Yeah, and my PhD is looking at the home educator identity. So I'm picking apart all of the different hats that us home educators wear, and looking at all of the factors that influence the formation of our identity and how we then parent and educate our children in this kind of dual role that we have. So I do that alongside other kind of home education kind of research studies, smaller ones along the way as well. I'm looking at the moment into access to GCSEs for home educated students. And last year I looked at access into higher education and applicants to university from a home
Wow,
educated perspective. So
interesting.
yeah, just trying to really just find out as much as I can, research as much as I can, and try and really support the community in having that support that they need. You know, we need the research backed evidence behind to be able to put things in place and to change policy to allow this to be
Definitely.
really viable and really successful. So yeah, I've got kind of a professional interest in it in that sense, but it comes from a very personal perspective that, you know, my daughter didn't fit the mainstream educational system and it didn't work for us. And I thought, do you know what? Let's look at our options. What else can we do? Because she deserves to have the best education that is available. And home education is a completely legal choice for all parents and carers in the UK. So why not look at that?
Gosh, well, firstly, wow, what an amazing kind of background up to this point, and thank you for sharing your professional and personal interest in home ed with us. Is it okay to call it home ed? Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to use the right terminology. Can I also please manifest that when you finish your PhD in a few years' time, can we please have you back as Dr. Lucy to tell us what you found?
All that hard
Right.
work, I need to get something out of it.
I'm holding you to that, Lucy. I'm going to write that in my diary now. So have Dr. Lucy back in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So that's really interesting. So the point we're at then, I think we need to talk a bit more then about what this kind of elective home education really is, because the only things that I really know, I've had a few people in my network that I've come across who've told me that they home educate their children. I've had a few students, because obviously I teach at university now. I've had a few students who tell me that throughout their kind of education career, they've been homeschooled at points, although it's been very rare that students have said that to me.
Yeah.
But the closest that this has kind of come to me in my life, I mean, I'm not even going to count the pandemic. I don't think that really counted as any kind of home education. Yeah, for me and my children, it was more like playing on some very popular online games and hoping that was doing the job. But interestingly, my oldest child, my son, started secondary in September, and so my children are all going through the very traditional system. But my son met a new friend at his secondary school who had come from home education from primary straight into secondary, like mainstream secondary. And that was really interesting. And they got on really well, my son and his friend. They had a few sleepovers, everything really, really good. And then the friend announced a couple of weeks ago that actually they're returning to be home educated and actually leaving the system. And so that I guess they'd only been there a term. And I said to my son, like, you know, how do you feel about it? And he said, oh, my friend just said if they feel it's the right choice for them, it's not about the friends, it's just about that the education system is working for them. And I guess the good thing is knowing that because young people are so well connected through social media and things these days, I know that my son will stay in touch with his friend, but I was also surprised, like, wow, that was quick. Like his friend told him one day, like, oh, I've decided I'm going to start being educated at home again. And that was it. Then they didn't come back. And I was like, oh, it seems
that simple.
Simpler.
It is that simple. And do you know what? For lots of people that I speak to, it's normally the other way around, is that they've attended in primary school and then they don't for secondary school. I hear a lot less stories of people home ed through primary and then choosing to go into the secondary school system.
Oh, really?
But I do often hear people kind of doing this trial and error type thing where they'll go in and say, actually, because you find with a lot of parents as well that if their young person has expressed a want to try school, if they've been home educated but they've maybe seen friends that they've made go into school and they've got an interest and they say, oh, actually, I want to try it, I want to see if I like it. And parents generally, if they're choosing to home ed, it's generally because they want to follow their young person's lead in education. So if that person says to them, I want to try school, some parents will then send their child to school to try it. And a lot of the time I hear stories of that child then going, actually, this isn't what I want. It can be too overwhelming, especially if they're used to a particular way of learning, and the school system is very different. So that does happen quite often. I hear in people's experiences that I talk to.
Amazing. So I guess it sounds, like most people are having it led by their child. So that sounds really good. So maybe can you tell us a bit more then what this really means to have this elective home education?
Yeah, so elective home education, it is a legal choice for parents and carers. And basically what it means is that the parent or carer has chosen to take full responsibility of educating their child. Now, this means that the child will no longer attend a mainstream school setting, but will instead remain at home and be educated under the full responsibility of the parent or legal guardian. That doesn't necessarily mean that it will be the parent or guardian doing the educating themselves, although sometimes it is. Sometimes the parents will choose to outsource that education to things like online schools, tutors, home educating groups, things like that. So they become more of a facilitator in the learning rather than the actual educator. But as I said, some parents do take on the educating role, and we use resources, textbooks, curriculum specifications, and everyday life experiences to teach. I will quickly say, just to make a point, that I'm speaking about the UK. Everything I say today will be in terms of relation of the UK and the UK laws, because home education does differ from country to country.
Okay.
Yeah, and whilst it's legal and valid right in the UK, other countries that's not always the case. So I will say to anyone listening and interested in home educating their child, look at the law specific to your country that you're in. And if you're in England, on the government website, you will find a document called Elective Home Education Guidance for Parents, and that's got loads of information on there about things like your right to home educate, what the expectations are by law, the responsibilities of the local authority, and things like that.
Oh, that's so helpful. Thank you.
It's a really good document. There's lots of documents on there, but that one is really easy to read. It's really concise, and it's got kind of key information. But the thing to remember and to know is that legally, as a parent, under Section 7 of the Education Act 1966, you are required to provide an efficient full-time education which is suitable for the age, ability and aptitude of a child, and as well accommodating any special educational needs that they have. But there is a lot of kind of ambiguity around, what is an efficient education, what is a full-time education, what is a suitable education. There's no clear guidance on this, but by law, that's what you have to follow in order to home educate your child.
Wow, that's so interesting. Thank you. So I guess then, if a parent or carer decides to follow home education, do they have to tell like their local authority that they're home educating, or like is someone allowed to come into your house to see what you're doing? Like, is there
there is an Ofsted for home education. You do have the local authority. If you're in England or Wales, you don't have to tell the local authority that you're going to home educate your child. Your school will notify them when you deregister. It's their responsibility. You just deregister from the school, and then it's the school's responsibility to tell the local authority. If your child has never been to school, i.e. they're coming up to compulsory school age and you're choosing to home educate from the start, there's currently no legal requirement for the parent to then inform the local authority. You can just choose to not register your child for a school place. Mainstream schools, it's an opt-in service. So if you don't opt in to mainstream school, you are home educating.
That's so crazy. I never saw it as an opt-in thing. I guess I'd have seen it as an opt-out.
Yeah.
So you flipped my mindset already, Lucy.
But I think that's the key, and that's why I'm so passionate about sharing information about home ed, because it's not known about enough, and parents have got this amazing right that they don't even know about. And you get a letter when your child reaches compulsory school age. You get that letter to say, it's time to register your child for school. You are opting into this service, this thing for your child. If you don't have to do it. But if you don't choose to register for a place for your child's school, you may flag up on the local authority system as being a child missing in education. So they may still contact you to see whether they feel like the child is receiving an adequate education and that it's been provided. But you don't have to actively approach them and say, I'm not registering my child for school, I'm going to home educate. You don't have to.
Oh, interesting. Wow, thank you. Well, that's already the first, well, not the first thing I've learned. You've told me so many things, but that's really interesting. Yeah, I never saw mainstream school as being opt-in. So I guess my next question I wanted to ask then, if you do decide to home educate, do you have to like replicate school, or do you have to have teaching experience, or do you have to have a degree to teach them? Because I know that obviously to be a teacher in schools, you have to have qualifications. So how does that work? What kind of experience would you need to have?
You absolutely do not have to be a teacher or have a degree or anything like that when you choose to home educate. When you choose to take full responsibility for your child's education, this is giving you complete control over how they receive that education. It's one of the beautiful things about it. You can tailor everything to the needs and abilities of your child.
Okay.
Parents aren't required to replicate the school educational delivery. You don't have to replicate school hours. You don't have to do exam times. You don't have to follow a timetable. You don't even have to follow a set curriculum. This is all down to the parent to decide what is best for their child or children and what they need to do. You don't have to follow the national curriculum or whatever the curriculum is in your country. Your child doesn't have to take SATs. They don't have to take end of year exams. They don't have to take GCSEs if they or you don't want to. It's completely flexible. The approach that you choose to take with your child is up to you. So as long as you can demonstrate that you are providing this full and efficient education for them, then you are doing exactly what you're being asked to do. In terms of educational approaches and philosophies, parents might decide to go down the route of something like unschooling. They may choose to have a semi-structured approach to learning, or they may even feel like that the national curriculum actually it does work for them, but they just want to deliver it themselves at home. There's no right or wrong way to educate your child.
Okay, so it's like there's different pathways then within homeschooling. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So you choose the best way that's for you. So you just want to deliver it in the right way that's best for them as an individual. And I will say sometimes this may take a bit of playing around with different approaches to find what does work for you and for them. Like my own experience with my daughter, she was deregistered from mainstream school when she was 14. So she was in year 9. So we did all of primary school. She went to preschool. She went through all of primary school, and we went through years 7, 8, and 9 in secondary school. So she did a lot of mainstream school. And we deregistered in year 9 for various reasons. And we home educated for 18 months full time. And this was a mix of tutoring for the subjects that I felt that I couldn't adequately support her in, like maths. And
wow! So you hired a tutor that would come to your house, or they were online, or what did it look like for you?
Because it was in the pandemic and after the pandemic, so this was all online, which worked for my daughter. She liked working in that way. So I did that for a couple of her subjects that I didn't feel comfortable, and kind of maths, I just can't get my head around maths.
I don't blame you. I totally understand.
I'll do it. So doing that, using resources online, because she's doing her GCSEs this year. So because of that, we were looking at exam specification, because I knew and she knew that she wanted to take GCSEs. So we had to follow some kind of structure. But doing it full time at home with the two of us, it just didn't work for us long term. My daughter expressed the desire to learn alongside peers as well, but we knew that the schooling system didn't work for her either. So our in between was trying this 14 to 16 provision at college. Now, this is where your young person can attend a mainstream college for their academic subjects, and it's part-time. So the college receives funding for 15 hours a week per person, per young person, to enable them to access the teaching. So for us now, she attends that provision for her 5 GCSEs that she's taking this year, and the rest of the time she learns life and key employability skills at home with me. So I take care of all of the stuff that's going to help her in life going forward, and the academic side of things that she needs because of the career that she wants to go into. She wants to be a paramedic. So the route.
Oh wow, fantastic.
Yeah, but it means that she does have to take the GCSEs, because she then needs to go into college, and then she needs to go potentially onto university, or looking at actually apprenticeship in the ambulance service, because I think that will fit her better. But we've kind of juggled things about, and we tried full-time home ed, it didn't work. So then we tried this part-time provision, and then part-time home ed, and this works for us. So it's just the wonderful thing about home education is that you can constantly reflect on your learner, and you can adapt as they adapt. So what works one year may need tweaking for the following year. And because you home educate, you can do that. You can adapt, or you can reflect, and you can change any aspect of any learning at any time to suit your child's needs.
That's fantastic. So it's like a totally personalised curriculum every day.
Exactly, which can
for your one learner.
Yeah, it can be exhausting as a parent to have to do that, but when you start seeing the results in your child, it's amazing. And I will just quickly say about qualifications as well, and teaching your child. And as I said, you don't need those. But if there are certain subjects that your child wants to learn and you don't feel you have adequate knowledge to support, you can outsource to a tutor or online school. Like I said, maths with me.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. So so you're not actually on your own. You can still use...
And that's really nice to get the support from people who are subject specific as well. But do you know what's even better than outsourcing to that? Is learning alongside your child. The best thing you can do is show your child that actually nobody knows everything. Even us adults, we don't know everything. We're all constantly learning. And that question that you've asked me, or that subject that you want to know more about, I don't actually know about it myself, so let's learn it together.
Oh,
You
I
know,
love that. That's like really good role model, like a real
yeah.
life, lifelong learner. That's fantastic.
You're actually teaching your child how to find out information, how to plan a topic, how to research, how to find reputable and trustworthy sources. How do you analyze information and synthesize it all together? These are skills that will really benefit them going on into life for lots of different situations. So if you can learn alongside them, I personally think that's the best way to tackle anything, because they then become more relaxed. And you know, a lot of home educators, they won't say that they're teachers, they won't say that they're educators, they'll say they're facilitators of learning, because they're helping their child find ways of learning.
Wow, that's interesting. I love that, facilitators. Yeah, that's definitely a word we started using in our traditional system. So I like that. And I guess my question is there then. You mentioned that your daughter said she wanted to learn alongside peers. I think the main thing that has made me never even consider home education for my children, although I love all the nice things you're mentioning there, is the socialization. Because I guess I would worry if my child, you know, obviously I've got other children in the family, but the chance for them to be with other people their same age, or I guess a lot of people I think must worry about how their child will socialize if they're not at school. Like, have you seen that being an issue? Like, is there a big home ed community, or?
This is one of the main and biggest questions asked around home education is around socialization. People are genuinely very concerned that their child's socialization will be affected, especially if their child's an only child. Now, while socialization concerns are very valid, I do want to reassure that this is a very personalized thing, and it will depend on the circumstance of each family. A lot of people who already home educate will respond to this by explaining all the way in which actually their child socializes better now that they are out of school. You know, think of all the clubs they go to, the groups that the child can now attend both during school time and outside. Meeting friends with their children is also another way to socialize naturally. When out shopping, at the park, chances for socialization with other people occur all the time. But not just thinking of it from an activity perspective. When we look at socialization that happens in school, controversially, it could be suggested that this socialization is less natural and more forced. So, you know,
okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking, like, in what other situation in life are you told that you have to socialise with people only of the same age band as you? You know, in a class of 30, the children are socialising with all children all of the same age. And also there's potentially less opportunity in this environment to choose to socialise with people that have the same interests as you. Whereas if you attend gymnastics or scouts or a photography course, you're socialising with others who have that same interest as you. And they may be older, they may be younger, they may be from a diverse range of backgrounds and experiences. And you might not get that in a typical year 4 class of 30 students. So you could argue also, what about playtime and lunchtime? The children in school can all mix and mingle and meet other children there. And yes, while this does happen for some, from experiences that I've heard from teachers in schools, children do usually stay in the same or similar class bubbles of friendships that they're used to. So it doesn't necessarily have that mix as well. So it does need to be something that you do need to be a bit more critical about it, thinking on both sides of things. You know, what does school offer? Is that better? What can home offer? Is that better? You know, and I do remember a quote from a teacher that I heard talking about this, who said that some people say that home educated children that they know are all socially awkward. And her response as a teacher was that she actually knew a lot of children attending mainstream school who also found social situations challenging, and as a result were not very confident. Yeah. So actually, rather than stereotyping home education as being socially awkward children, it's better to kind of acknowledge that there are a range of young people generally in life that find social situations hard, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a result of being home educated. And you know, socialization is what you make of it. So if you can get your child out and about doing things like clubs and groups, even things like something quite controversial as like online video games. I know there's a lot of discussion around online video games. How much of a benefit are they to children's learning and that? But that social environment and the skills that you learn, you know, as long as you're making it paramount that it's safe what they're doing. So things, even children that are not comfortable going out and socializing, but feel more comfortable doing it in an online way, you know, the world is changing and we need to adapt. And there are other ways to socialize aside from putting 30 children in a classroom and saying that that's the only way.
Definitely. And I totally agree with what you're saying, because I guess that's what I've seen at university level. When I've gone from teaching in the classroom in the primary school where everyone's the same age, at university, what makes our most interesting conversations are where we've got people of all different ages, bringing all different experiences and backgrounds. So actually, I totally hear what you're saying, that maybe that's more natural. If you meet at the park or meet at a parkour route or whatever, you're actually meeting people with a shared interest rather than just the same age who happen to be born in the same time period as you. So that's a really thoughtful point. So yeah, I guess thanks for breaking that stereotype, and that's true. I think because home education, in my opinion, is something that it seems quite rare. It's not something I've come across a lot, and probably because I have been a teacher in mainstream schools. So that's what I'm dealing with. So I think that's why it's so valuable to hear you talk about actually there shouldn't be a stigma around it. It's just a different choice. It's a legal choice that a parent or carer can make. So there should be no stigma, right?
No, exactly. And that's the thing. Like I say, there's less information out there or readily available, or just kind of it's not as in the eye line to everybody as mainstream school. So people aren't aware that actually, whilst it's kind of presented to everybody as being the other form of education, mainstream is the default and everything else is other, it shouldn't be like that. And it isn't like that. It is a completely legal and valid choice of the parent on how they educate. And it shouldn't be seen as this kind of backdoor other way of doing it, or hippie way of doing it, and all of these kind of derogatory terminology that is used a lot around for people that choose to home educate. And I think a lot of that is just down to lack of information or lack of correct information out there available. And that's what I'm saying about the importance of there being research-backed information out there to help inform the policy. The policy changes that need to happen, because whilst it is so important to listen to people's experiences and to listen to people's opinions on it, and that is very important, very valid to feed into it, to change policy, to create legislation, to make big changes to enable support to be available for this group of people, there has to be research behind it. So we need to have more and more time, money, effort, attention put into research in this field, and to grow it so that it becomes well within its own right.
Definitely. Oh my goodness, so many good points. I feel like on that note, before I crack into my next questions, because I want to ask you some stuff maybe around special educational needs, and maybe just drill down a bit more on those kind of benefits and negatives of home ed. We're going to take a break. So Lucy, this has been the most amazing first half of the show. We're going to go and enjoy our 2-minute tech and our news and adverts. So don't go away, and we'll be back in about 6.5 minutes.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
At the National Higher Education Conference, Unison Assistant General Secretary John Richards opened proceedings with a damning critique of the government's approach towards university education, according to Unison's own website. Mr. Richards focused on out-of-touch ministers who fail to understand the current funding crisis, and pointed out that the funding models across the UK seem to be broken. He cited the issue of limited government funding as causing a de facto cap on student numbers, and accused the government of trashing the UK's reputation for higher education in Europe, leading to big drops in the numbers of overseas students. A story covered by Teachers Talk Radio News last week. Mr. Richards went on to assert that those in government do not understand the cost of living crisis because they've never had to face it. Strike action by those working in the HE sector has been part of a wave of action taken by unions across a range of public sectors in recent weeks. The last week saw the release of details of government plans to revamp children's social care in England. BBC News reported on the plan for more early support for families and the extra £200 million funding for the next 2 years. Last year, a review warned that tens of thousands more children could end up in care without additional funding and reform. The plan has faced criticism that many of the changes are being rolled out as localised pilots rather than a national programme. The government plans to put families at the heart of the reform and intends to provide better support for all vulnerable children in order to reduce the need for crisis intervention. There will be pilots in 12 local authorities which will deliver more early support for families struggling with addiction, domestic abuse and poor mental health. There will also be more family-type placement for children in care with relatives, friends or foster families. Other changes include plans to recruit more foster carers, a simpler process and more support for relatives or friends who take on children, a rise in the leaving care allowance, and support for councils to recruit and retain more social workers. Economic, Constitutional and Social Policy Forum Politia has published an article focusing on its views of the proposed changes to the school's history curriculum. The publication History, Whose History? The Battle for the School Curriculum features 3 historians' views on the proposals. The government's plan for reform came in response to recommendations from the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. The plan for a new model history curriculum for pupils to see themselves as integral parts of what makes up the UK today was proposed. The essays included in the publication focusing on the responses of a variety of academics who all appear to conclude that there is no need for the proposed changes, because diversity is already built in the current programme. Further details of the publication and forum for debate can be found on the Politia website. Finally, a school principal in a rural part of Northern Ireland has expressed concerns over safety after it emerged that recruitment of lollipop men and women is being frozen. It comes as part of a drive to save money. The current power-sharing deadlock in Stormont meant no budget could be agreed and significant cuts needed to be made. The principal of a rural primary school, Donna Winters, told the BBC that until recently there had been consistent crossing patrol staff that have been vital in making sure pupils can cross roads safely, but that they have not had staff since December. The school has had to resort to employing a patrol staff member directly and, when they are absent, teaching and support staff have to fill in. Ms Winters went on to point out that safety was not an area where cuts should be made. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, it's Safer Internet Week, with the official day being on the 7th of February. This year, the UK Safer Internet Centre focuses on Want to Talk About It, making space for conversation online. They've got loads of educational resources on the website saferinternet.org.uk, banded into 3 to 7, 7 to 11, 11 to 14 and 14 to 18 years of age. They are even translated into Welsh and have adapted resources for SEND and ALD. So, they have pretty much covered all bases. You need to take a look. But why do we need to get our young people talking about this? Well, let me try and give you an idea in one breath. With an estimated 5.16 billion people using the internet, that's 64.4% of the world's population. It's estimated that around 500,000 predators pose a threat to young people daily, with the main target being 12 to 15-year-old children. With a quick search of statistics from the internet, I found supposedly 1 in 25 children will be manipulated in some way this year, and 80% of predatory behaviour will be through social media. This coupled with only 15% of parents actually knowing what their children are doing online makes this an issue which definitely needs to be talked about with our young people. To get some perspective on this, every 60 seconds TikTok users watch over 167 million videos. Data never sleeps. We need to know how to stay safe because the sheer volume of data means it cannot effectively be policed. Please send your thoughts amongst the 575,000 other posts every 60 seconds on Twitter at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
So welcome back to the Friday morning break with me, Dr. Poppy Gibson, and today we are talking about home education, and we have got our guest Lucy Wheeler joining us to talk about why parents and carers might make that legal decision to home educate their child, and what are some of those negatives, those positives around choosing to home educate. Interestingly, before the break, Lucy was talking about the fact that you actually don't need any teaching experience, and also the fact that you can hire tutors to help you as well. So welcome back, Lucy.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Welcome back. Sorry, just tech gremlins my end, but welcome back to the second half of our show. And I'm really excited that we've still got some more time left, because I have a few more questions to ask you, if that's okay.
No problem.
So I know that you kind of mentioned about you found most people kind of go to one type of school and then leave. How difficult is it, if your child is already in a school, to go about removing them to home educate? How might someone do that if they wanted to make that decision?
It's not difficult at all. It is a really straightforward process mostly. There are a few caveats on that, but again, I can only talk about the UK here as well. So if anywhere in the UK, anywhere outside the UK, sorry, then please check the requirements of your country. But in the UK, if you're in England and Wales, you can simply send a letter of deregistration to your school. There are lots of templates online for these, and places like Education Otherwise, which is a registered charity to support other types of education. They've got some good templates that you can use as well, and they offer a membership to join, so you can get some support in that as well. But the letter will simply state that you are removing your child from the school role and choosing to home educate them. Once this letter has been sent in, you are free to home educate your child. It is as simple as that. You don't have to get a response from them. The letter you sending in is enough for you to start to begin your home ed journey. I'd recommend keeping a log of what you send just as proof. And some people do hand deliver the letter just to make sure, but an emailed letter is sufficient. I emailed my letter in. I did get a response from the school. A lot of the time, the schools will come back at you and try to ask you to attend a meeting to discuss your decision, see what they can do to change your mind and support the young person to stay at the school with them. If you want to do that, you absolutely can, but you are under no obligation to. You don't have to have the meeting. You sending in the letter and saying that you want to deregister is enough. It's then the school's responsibility, as I said before, to notify the local authority of this. And then usually the local authority will reach out to you over the coming months and make some sort of contact. I say usually because they don't always, but sometimes they do. It is worth noting that Scotland is slightly different. If you're in Scotland, you do have to ask currently permission to remove your child from school from the local authority. And this is also the case for the whole of the UK if your child attends a special needs school. You can't simply remove your child from these settings. You have to gain permission, as you have to prove and discuss how you're going to support them and their special educational needs going forward. But England and Wales, mainstream school, send in the letter, all done.
Interesting. So then you're saying some people, depending on the needs of their child, might decide to home educate. What does it look like in England? Like, can you home educate your child if they have special educational needs? And how would you do that? Because I guess if children are in school with, identified SEND, they might have extra support or differentiated planning. So I guess, does that make it more difficult to home educate?
I think if you look at it from a different perspective, actually home educating a child that has the additional needs could be seen as being better, because you are giving that personalised education based on their needs, their abilities, and their interests. So you could argue it from the other perspective, that they would get more support and they become less invisible in the system because they are getting exactly the education that they need, as stated, if they've got, for example, an EHCP. So you can home educate your child if they have special needs. The only thing to note is that, like I said, if they're in a SEND provision, you will have to get permission before they can be deregistered, because there is a duty placed on that provision to provide specific SEND support for your child. So if this is being taken away, you need to be able to demonstrate that you are still able to provide this for them.
Okay.
But if your child is in a mainstream school and they have an EHCP there, you can just follow the usual route of deregistration by informing the head teacher and removing them. You don't need permission from the local authority for this. It's only if they're in a special educational needs setting, a specific special school. But looking at them when they're at home and learning, there's so much support out there. And there are lots of groups out there specifically for home educators who are home educating children with additional needs. And I think this comes back to when we talk about kind of the reasons why people home educate and things like that. there are a huge number of people that choose to home educate specifically for that reason. They don't feel that the school is adequately able to provide the SEND needs that their child needs, so they choose to home educate. So because of that, there is a very large portion of the home educating community that have children with special educational needs.
So you mentioned these groups, Lucy, that parents and carers could join. So they've got this home ed community. Where would they find these groups? Like, what would they kind of look like?
I mean, I would recommend going onto Facebook. Facebook is very highly populated with lots and lots of home educating groups and communities, and there are lots of them that are specific to areas as well. So if you type in home education groups, you'll come up with lots and lots of lists, and you can specify it down to a particular area. For example, home educating groups in Essex, and it will bring up lots in there, or even closer, Chelmsford, and you can find people that are really local to you. And then on these groups, there are own mini communities, so you engage in conversations, and people will tell you about different groups that are available in your area that you can attend.
Wow. So I mean, are there that many people home educating? Do we have an idea of numbers, like home educators versus mainstream schooling? Like, but I mean, for you to even say like each city is going to have its own home ed community, like I didn't realize there'd be so many people home educating.
They are everywhere.
Wow.
There are lots of us around. I can't give you numbers because of the reasoning behind that, because you don't have to register to home educate. You don't have to tell the local authority or anything like that you home educate. So there are no firm statistics. There are statistics out there based on people that have registered and things like that, but they're not, I wouldn't say they're very accurate, because you don't have to, people that never send their children to school and then home educate from the start, you won't necessarily know about those particular children, which causes a lot of problems. On the flip side of things, a lot of people worry about safeguarding and keeping these children safe that are kind of off the radar. Again, that's a whole other discussion for another time. But there are so many people choosing to home educate, and there has been a bit of a peak since the pandemic, because people were able to home educate or homeschool, through the pandemic, and kind of try before you buy. And
yeah,
that's exactly what I did. We did it through the pandemic, and I was like, oh my goodness, my child is thriving. Like, why haven't I done this sooner?
Amazing. So, I mean, Lucy, I love that it worked out for you. I tried before I bought, and I definitely did not want to buy that product, and we definitely returned to school in case of my children. But
I hear a lot of that as well.
Yeah, I imagine it depends very much on the child and the parent or carer. But another question that's just occurred to me, if it's okay to ask. So you said, if your child has a special educational need or disability, actually being able to provide that daily personalized education could be so empowering, and also I know a lot of friends with children with particular diagnoses. Part of the difficulty is even getting them out of the house in the morning. So I suppose you've not got those issues. But how would children, and you mentioned there's some people home educate right from the start, they never even go to any school. How would your child get assessed or diagnosed? Like, do you think those children that have never been in the school system, where a teacher might flag a child for assessment or something, do you think maybe those diagnoses go unspotted if you home educate?
I would say not necessarily, because school isn't the only route of diagnosis for these things. So you can. So for our own personal story, we went through, or we're currently going through, the ADHD system of assessment, and that wasn't done through school, that was done through our GP. So there are other routes to go into the assessment or diagnosis assessment system. Not necessarily. And because we home educate, we got all the typical things of being sent, this is the questionnaire that you have to send to your school for us to get information back from your school. And I was like, well, we home educate, so we don't have access to that. So the alternative is a friend or a family member can fill in that questionnaire and send it in. So there are other ways and routes to go down to get a diagnosis if that's what you want for your particular child. So I wouldn't worry too much of missing out on that particular element of it if you feel that your child may need to go down the diagnosis or assessment route at some point. It doesn't have to be done through school.
Okay, brilliant. That's good to know. I hadn't thought of that, actually. And I suppose in a way, the fact you're spending so much time with your your child, without them going to school for 6 hours a day or whatever. Maybe it's more likely you might spot some of those behaviours or symptoms that might need to be assessed. So, okay, that's a really thoughtful point. Thank you.
And I think as well, thinking about any kind of SEND needs at home, like something as simple as, if your child struggles with sleep at night time and then you're getting them up first thing in the morning and then putting them in for 6.5 hours at school when they're absolutely shattered because they were so, wired through the night that they couldn't shut off, or they were having, had a meltdown in the middle of the night and couldn't get back to sleep, you're then sending a very dysregulated child into a very stressful social situation. Whereas, if you're homeschooling, let them have a lay in, let them catch up with their sleep and start school at midday. It doesn't matter. They're still getting learning. You're doing it to the optimum of their needs.
So, and you've got that flexibility then to set your timetable. That's fantastic. Right, Lucy, I've got 3 questions left. Okay. We've got about 10 minutes to go.
I'll try and be concise.
No, it's great. I'm loving how much I'm learning today. It's so enlightening. So I've kind of got two more things I want to ask you about home education, which is our theme on the show today, and then just one fun one at the end. And you can probably guess what it's going to be about. For those people listening who aren't sure, you're in for a treat. Lucy and I have something else in common apart from loving education, being passionate educators. So, the next question I want to ask, because I guess the one benefit of mainstream school for many people, including me, is the fact that it's free. And I think having free education is so incredible here in the UK, and knowing that we can send our child to be educated for free. I guess my question is, how much does it cost to home educate your child, and does it cost a lot? And if it does, can you get help with those costs? I don't really know kind of what that looks like.
Yeah, unfortunately, this isn't going to be kind of a conversion question for a lot of people, because it does cost, and there is very little in terms of help that you can get. It does vary from person to person, but you do need to consider costs for things like resources, days out, textbooks, tutors, exams, stationery. And of course, you can spend as much or as little as you want. There are lots and lots of free resources out there, so many free resources out there for home educators, and you don't have to use tutors or online learning. But these are things to consider cost-wise when you're kind of weighing up the options. And home educators also get discounts at some educational places when visiting, just like a school group would. So there's that to bear in mind as well. You just kind of have to look for it, and sometimes you have to ask for it. It's not a given as a home educator. So you do have to be a bit bold in kind of asking for things. But there are lots of free educational trips that you can do, museums, libraries, free events, stuff like that. Be a bit savvy with it if you want to and need to save money. You will, however, if you choose to do something like GCSEs, you do have to pay the exam costs and any kind of accessibility needs that you need to have, and things like textbooks if you're using them, because if you're taking exams, you will need to follow some sort of curriculum in order to pass the exam. And another thing to consider cost-wise is how many children you have. Remember, if you've got more than one, these costs will increase because it will be for each child as well. I do hear lots of stories of families that do it on a low budget, so it is possible. But in terms of financial support, there isn't really any that I'm aware of.
Okay.
The parent, you've chosen to remove your child from the mainstream education system, so you have agreed to take full responsibility for them and their education, and this does mean financially too. I have heard that some local authorities can offer a little bit of financial support, but I'm not quite sure of the eligibility of this. And, as a general rule, you've taken the responsibility on yourself, so any cost that you incurred, you unfortunately do have to fund yourself.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. No, that's good to know. So maybe one of the disadvantages then. So that kind of brings me on to my penultimate question then. Just to summarise, and you've told us so much on the show today about why people might choose to home educate. Could you maybe summarise what do you think then are those top advantages and maybe those negatives that we have to acknowledge if we want to go into this with our eyes open?
Yeah, I'll start with the negatives because it's always good to end on a positive.
Okay. I like it. I like your style, Lucy.
But also, it's important to acknowledge that there are potential kind of cons, negatives, because I'm not here to say home education is the best thing. Don't go to school, do home education. School works for some children, and I'm very much an advocate for every child learning in the best way. So I'm not saying that home ed is the only way to go. So it's important for me to acknowledge that there are some things that you would need to consider that could be seen as slightly negative. We've already spoken about the cost implications. You are fully responsible for all of the costs involved. And if your child's taking GCSEs, this can go into thousands. So just be aware of that. Good idea to plan ahead. A lot of home educators, quick tip, is that they will start their GCSEs early and children will spread them out over kind of 3 or 4 years. So you've got children taking GCSEs at like 13, 14, 15, 16, like that. It can be time consuming depending on how you wish to deliver education. If you want something that's more of a structured route, even things such as printing off worksheets, if you want to do that, sourcing things to do, writing things up, planning it all takes up time. So if you're working alongside trying to do it, or you're a single parent where this all falls onto you, it could be seen as a bit of a negative. Again, as we mentioned earlier, socialisation, this could be seen as a negative thing, especially if your young person struggles in this way, so bear that in mind. And a big thing, actually, that comes from talking to a lot of people is disapproval from friends and family. This is a big one that I hear a lot about. People who decide to home educate who don't have the support of their friends and family members, they can find it really, really challenging. We don't have time to go into depth with this today, but this is very real for a lot of families and it does impact on a big scale. So it's not to say that you can't do it if you don't have the support of your friends and families, but it's worth considering what you feel this would impact on your experience. But benefits, it is a very personalised way of giving education to a young person. It's based on their needs, their interests, their abilities. They're getting that one-to-one learning experience, and they are also able to work at their own pace, which is key. Being able to tailor your child's education to the career route they're taking, which is a big benefit for myself and my daughter. She wants to be a paramedic, so everything that she learns is giving her the skills that she needs for the job that she so desperately wants to go into.
Amazing.
Right. Giving the opportunity to the young person who feels anxious, unsafe or overwhelmed in school the chance to learn in a safe, comfortable and familiar environment. And just the flexibility of teaching what you want, teaching what your child's interested and passionate about, and planning to your own schedule based on your own individual family needs. I think that's just ultimate.
Wow, amazing. And that you somehow managed to summarize it in a nutshell. That's fantastic. And that was really good. It shows how well you know your subject. So thanks for kind of pointing out those things that people who are considering home education really need to be aware of. And I think that's key what you're saying about a network, because I think, you know, that old saying, like, it takes a village to raise a child. And I suppose when you haven't got the school at being part of your village, then it's even more important perhaps that if you don't have friends and family support, that you're finding that support through, like you say, the home education, wider community, and you know, maybe making new friends as well, I guess, because you're going to find people with the same interests, the same kind of, you know, ethos about education as you. So potential for new networks.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say the home ed community is incredibly supportive as well and really welcoming. So it's a great one to be part of if you want to.
That's lovely. Thanks, Lucy. So, wow, I feel like I've learned so much. You've kind of home educated me. You've studio educated me in the radio studio this morning, Lucy. So I thought after all that, talking about all that hard work you've been doing as a home educator, maybe we could end talking then. What do you do outside of that? I guess it must be even more important to find some downtime, because your home is being the school. Obviously you're doing things outside the home as well, but how do you relax? And I have a feeling we might have a furry friend we need to mention as well.
Although I don't know that my furry friend is any less stressful, because my furry friend is a little reactive furry friend, so she takes lots of training from me as well. So
tell us all about her. What's her name? And tell us about her.
Her name's Skylar. She's a German Shepherd cross with a Belgian Malinois, and she's just turned 2, so she's very much a handful. She's the most loving, loyal, wonderful dog in the world, but she is incredibly reactive, and we're having to do lots and lots of work on kind of how we live with this reactivity. She came from not very good breeders, so didn't have the best start in life. So it was a little bit of a rescue, and I've spent, the last 2 years trying to reassure her that life is okay. She doesn't have to be scared and worried of everyone and everything. But because of that, she's become incredibly protective of me. She imprinted on me quite early. So she loves me so much. She doesn't like anyone else coming near me.
Oh, she's your own personal guardian, Lucy.
She is, and she's the most, when she trusts someone, she's the most loving, loyal, amazing dog ever. It's just working on how to get her to trust that when I say it's okay, and she can relax and stand down from her guard, which she doesn't regularly do. But I think that's the Malinois in her. She is constantly on guard and protecting her family. But yeah, to have downtime, we quite often do lots and lots of walking out and about. And if I'm not focusing on how education works for children, I'm educating myself on how to work with training reactive dogs. And I want to do my behaviourist certificate as well, so that I can help other people. Because I think when I first got Skylar, it was such a lonely thing to go through, because she was so reactive. I was really stuck with where I could go, who I could see, what I could do. And it became really, really lonely, and I didn't really know who to reach out to. So I want to kind of train up in canine behaviourism so that I can support other people that have dogs like that on a more kind of mental health and emotional owner basis, to say, actually, I know it's really lonely, but you can get through it.
Oh, so it seems like you are a born educator, Lucy, whether it's your own daughter, other people's children, or your dog and other dog owners. That's amazing.
I don't like my brain to rest, really. If I'm not doing one thing, I'll switch and do something else.
That's amazing. I think learning is so empowering, and actually don't feel bad that learning is your downtime. Like I totally get it too, and I feel like we'll have to arrange a doggy date with your Belgian Mal and German Shepherd cross with my German Shepherd, maybe when we're feeling very brave and when we have caffeine. We will have to attempt that, because I think that will be fun. But I just want to thank you so much for coming on Teachers Talk Radio this morning. It's been amazing to have something really different today, because often we're talking about mainstream education or the typical classroom, and it's really interesting to think that isn't the only classroom. You can have a home classroom. The world is your classroom if you're a home educator. So thank you so much. And the last thing just to say, Lucy, before you go, if anyone does have any questions about home education or about anything we've talked about today, are you happy to maybe tell us where they can find you or contact you, if that's okay?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram, so you can always send me a message on there. What I'll do is in the chat, I'll put my handles on there in the chat so that you can follow it on there. But I'm always around on social media, so if anyone wants to ping me over a message, then I will be available.
Wonderful. And I have to say also, thanks. I love all the videos of Skylar on Instagram as well. So anyone who's not following Lucy, jump onto Insta. And if Lucy.
I have two Instagrams, because I realised that not everybody wants to see my dog all the time. So I've got a dog one which follows her kind of behaviour journey, and then I've got my home educating research one as well. So I'll pop them both down if anyone wants to join the dog one either.
Thank you. Definitely the dog one, but both. Thank you so much, Lucy. And like I say, hopefully when you are Dr. Wheeler, we will have you back on the show in the future and see what you found.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to chat about this morning.
Thanks, Lucy, and enjoy the weekend.
And you. Take care. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.